Julius Caesar, from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia at en.wikipedia.org. Gaius Julius Caesar, born 12th or 13th July 100 BC, died 15th March 44 BC, often simply called Julius Caesar, was a Roman military and political leader and one of the most influential men in world history. He played a critical role in the transformation of the Roman Republic into the Roman Empire. His conquest of Gaul extended the Roman world all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, and he was also responsible for the first Roman invasion of Britain in 55 BC. Leading his legions across the Rubicon, Caesar sparked civil war in 49 BC that left him the undisputed master of the Roman world. After assuming control of the government, he began extensive reforms of Roman society and government. He was proclaimed dictator for life, and he heavily centralized the bureaucracy of the Republic. This forced the hand of a friend of Caesar, Marcus Junius Brutus, who then conspired with others to murder the dictator and restore the Republic. This dramatic assassination occurred on the Ides of March, March 15th, in 44 BC, and led to another Roman civil war. In 42 BC, 2 years after his assassination, the Roman Senate officially sanctified him as one of the Roman deities. Caesar's military campaigns are known in detail from his own written commentaries, and many details of his life are recorded by later historians such as Appian, Suetonius, Plutarch, Cassius Dio, and Strabo. Other information can be gleaned from other contemporary sources, such as the letters and speeches of Caesar's political rival Cicero, the poetry of Catullus, and the writings of the historian Sallust. Section 1. Life. Section 1.1. Early life. Caesar was born into a patrician family, the gens Iulia, which claimed descent from Iulus, son of the Trojan prince Aeneas, himself the son of the goddess Venus. The branch of the gens Iulia which bore the cognomen Caesar was descended, according to Pliny the Elder, from a man who was born by Caesarean section, from the Latin verb to cut, caedo, ere caesus sum. The Historia Augusta suggests 3 alternative explanations of the name: that the first Caesar killed an elephant, caesai in Moorish, in battle; that he had a thick head of hair, Latin caesarius; or that he had bright grey eyes, Latin oculis caesis. Although of impeccable aristocratic patrician stock, the Iulii Caesaris were not rich by the standards of Roman nobility. No member of the family had achieved any outstanding prominence in recent times, though in Caesar's father's generation there was a renaissance of their fortunes. His father, also called Gaius Julius Caesar, reached the rank of praetor, perhaps through the influence of Gaius Marius, the war hero and prominent politician who had married his sister Julia. His mother, Aurelia Cotte, came from an influential family which had produced several consuls. They lived in a modest house in the Subura, a lower-class neighborhood of Rome, where Marcus Antonius Nefo, an orator and grammarian who originally came from Gaul, was employed as Caesar's tutor. Caesar had 2 sisters, both called Julia. Little else is recorded of Caesar's childhood. Suetonius and Plutarch's biographies of him both begin abruptly in Caesar's teens. The opening paragraphs of both appear to be lost. Caesar spent his formative years in a period of turmoil. The social war was fought from 91 to 88 BC between Rome and her Italian allies over the issue of Roman citizenship, while Mithridates of Pontus threatened Rome's eastern provinces. Domestically, Roman politics was divided between 2 factions, the optimates, who favored aristocratic rule, and the populares, who preferred to appeal directly to the electorate. Caesar's uncle Marius was a popularis. His protege and rival Lucius Cornelius Sulla was an optimas. Both distinguished themselves in the social war, and both wanted command of the war against Mithridates, which was initially given to Sulla. But when Sulla left the city to take command of his army, a tribune passed a law transferring the appointment to Marius. Sulla responded by marching on Rome. Marius was forced into exile and command was returned to Sulla, but when Sulla left on campaign, Marius returned, and he and his ally Lucius Cornelius Cinna seized the city and declared Sulla a public enemy. Marius's troops took violent revenge on Sulla's supporters. Marius died early in 86 BC, but his faction remained in power. In 84 BC, Caesar's father died suddenly while putting his shoes on one morning, and at 16, Caesar was the head of the family. The following year, he was nominated for the position of flamandialis, high priest of Jupiter. Lucius Cornelius Merula, the previous incumbent, had died in Marius's purges. And since the holder of that position not only had to be a patrician, but also be married to a patrician, he broke off his engagement to Cossutia, a girl of wealthy equestrian family he had been betrothed to since boyhood, and married Cinna's daughter Cornelia. Then, having brought Mithridates to terms, Sulla returned to finish the civil war against the Marian party. After a campaign throughout Italy, he finally crushed the Marians at the Battle of the Colline Gate in November 82 BC. With both consuls dead, he had himself appointed to the revived office of dictator. But whereas a dictator was traditionally appointed for 6 months at a time, Sulla's appointment had no fixed term limit. There followed a series of bloody proscriptions against his political enemies, which dwarfed even Marius's purges. Statues of Marius were destroyed, and Marius's body was exhumed and thrown in the Tiber. Cinna was already dead, killed by his own soldiers in a mutiny. Caesar, as the nephew of Marius and son-in-law of Cinna, was targeted. He was stripped of his inheritance, his wife's dowry, and his priesthood, but refused to divorce Cornelia and was forced to go into hiding. The threat against him was lifted by the intervention of his mother's family, who were supporters of Sulla, and the Vestal Virgins. Sulla gave in reluctantly, and is said to have declared that he saw many Mariuses in Caesar. Section 1.2. Early Career. Caesar did not return to Rome, but instead joined the army, serving under Marcus Minucius Thermus in Asia. Ironically, it had been the loss of his priesthood that allowed him to pursue a military career. The flamandialis was not permitted to ride or even touch a horse, sleep 3 nights outside his own bed or 1 night outside Rome, or look upon an army. On a mission to Bithynia to secure the assistance of King Nicomedes' fleet, he spent so long at his court that rumors of an affair with the king arose, which would persist for the rest of his life. Nonetheless, he served with distinction, winning the civic crown for his part in the siege of Mytilene. He also served briefly under Servilius Isauricus in Cilicia. After 2 years of unchallenged power, having reformed the Roman constitution to his satisfaction, Sulla resigned his dictatorship and re-established consular government. He dismissed his lictors and walked unguarded in the forum, offering to give account of his actions to any citizen. This lesson in supreme confidence Caesar later ridiculed, saying, Sulla did not know his political ABCs. Sulla was elected to a second consulship before retiring to private life. He died 2 years later of liver failure, and was accorded a magnificent state funeral. In 78 BC, on hearing of Sulla's death, Caesar felt it would now be safe for him to return to Rome. His return coincided with an attempted anti-Sullian coup by Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, but Caesar, lacking confidence in Lepidus's leadership, did not participate. Instead, he turned to advocacy, bringing a failed prosecution against Cornelius Dolabella. He became known for his exceptional oratory, accompanied by impassioned gestures and a high-pitched voice, and ruthless prosecution of former governors notorious for extortion and corruption. The great orator Cicero even commented, Does anyone have the ability to speak better than Caesar? Aiming at rhetorical perfection, Caesar traveled to Rhodes in 75 BC for philosophical and oratorical studies with the famous teacher Apollonius Melon, who was earlier the instructor of Cicero himself. On the way across the Aegean Sea, Caesar was kidnapped by Cilician pirates and held prisoner in the Dodecanese islet of Pharmakos. He maintained an attitude of superiority throughout his captivity. When the pirates thought to demand a ransom of 20 talents of gold, he insisted they ask for 50. After the ransom was paid, Caesar raised a fleet, pursued and captured the pirates, and imprisoned them in Pergamon. The governor of Asia refused to execute them as Caesar demanded, preferring to sell them as slaves. But Caesar returned to the coast and had them crucified on his own authority, as he had promised to them when in captivity, a promise the pirates had taken as a joke. He then proceeded to Rhodes, but was soon called back into military action in Asia, raising a band of auxiliaries to repel an incursion from Pontus. On his return to Rome, he was elected military tribune, a first step on the cursus honorum of Roman politics. The war against Spartacus took place around this time, 73 to 71 BC, but it is not recorded what role, if any, Caesar played in it. He was elected quaestor for 69 BC, and during that year he delivered the funeral oration for his aunt Julia, widow of Marius, and included images of Marius, unseen since the days of Sulla, in the funeral procession. His own wife Cornelia also died that year. After her funeral, Caesar went to serve his quaestorship in Hispania under Antistius Vetus. While there, he is said to have encountered a statue of Alexander the Great, and realized with dissatisfaction he was now at an age when Alexander had the world at his feet, while he had achieved comparatively little. For a contemporary example, Pompey had risen far faster through military conquests than most Roman politicians. He requested and was granted an early discharge from his duties, and returned to Roman politics. On his return he married Pompeia, a granddaughter of Sulla. He was elected aedile, restored the trophies of Marius's victories, a controversial move at the time given the Sullan regime was still in place. He also brought prosecutions against men who had benefited from Sulla's proscriptions, and spent a great deal of borrowed money, largely from Crassus, on public works and games, and outshone his colleague Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus. He was also suspected of involvement in 2 abortive coup attempts. Section 1.3. Caesar comes to prominence. 63 BC was an eventful year for Caesar. He persuaded a tribune, Titus Labienus, to prosecute the Optimate senator Gaius Rabirius for the political murder, 37 years previously, of the tribune Lucius Apuleius Saturninus, and had himself appointed as one of the 2 judges to try the case. Rabirius was defended by both Cicero and Quintus Hortensius, but was convicted of perduelio, treason. While he was exercising his right of appeal to the people, the praetor Quintus Caecilius Metellus Celer adjourned the assembly by taking down the military flag from the Janiculum Hill. Labienus could have resumed the prosecution at a later session, but did not do so. Caesar's point had been made, and the matter was allowed to drop. Labienus would remain an important ally of Caesar over the next decade. The same year, Caesar ran for election to the post of Pontifex Maximus, chief priest of the Roman state religion, after the death of Quintus Caecilius Metellus Pius, who had been appointed to the post by Sulla. He ran against 2 powerful optimates, the former consuls Quintus Lutatius Catulus and Publius Servilius Vatia Isauricus. There were accusations of bribery by all sides. Caesar is said to have told his mother on the morning of the election that he would return as Pontifex Maximus, or not at all, expecting to be forced into exile by the enormous debts he had run up to fund his campaign. In the event, he won comfortably, despite his opponent's greater experience and standing. The post came with an official residence on the Via Sacra. When Cicero, who was consul that year, exposed Catiline's conspiracy to seize control of the Republic, Catullus and others accused Caesar of involvement with the plot. Caesar, who had been elected praetor for the following year, took part in the debate in the Senate on how to deal with the conspirators. During the debate, Caesar was passed a note. Marcus Porcius Cato, who would become his most implacable political opponent, accused him of corresponding with the conspirators and demanded that the message be read aloud. Caesar passed him the note, which, embarrassingly, turned out to be a love letter from Cato's half-sister Servilia. Caesar argued persuasively against the death penalty for the conspirators, proposing life imprisonment instead, but a speech by Cato proved decisive, and the conspirators were executed. While praetor in 62 BC, Caesar supported Caecilius Metellus, now tribune, in proposing controversial legislation, and the pair were so obstinate they were suspended from the office by the Senate. Caesar attempted to continue to perform his duties, only giving way when violence was threatened. The Senate was persuaded to reinstate him after he quelled the public demonstrations in his favor. A commission had been set up to investigate Catiline's conspiracy, and Caesar was again accused of complicity. But, relying on Cicero's evidence that he had reported what he knew of the plot voluntarily, he was cleared, and not only one of his accusers, but also one of the commissioners, were sent to prison. That year, the festival of the Bona Dea, good goddess, was held at Caesar's house. No men were permitted to attend, but a young man called Publius Clodius Pulcher managed to gain admittance disguised as a woman, apparently for the purpose of seducing Caesar's wife Pompeia. He was caught and prosecuted for sacrilege. Caesar gave no evidence against Clodius at his trial, at which he was acquitted, but nevertheless divorced Pompeia, saying that, "My wife ought not even to be under suspicion." After his praetorship, Caesar was appointed to govern Hispania Ulterior, outer Iberia, but he was still in considerable debt, and needed to satisfy his creditors before he could leave. He turned to Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's richest men. In return for political support in his implacable opposition to the interests of Pompey, Crassus paid some of Caesar's debts and acted as guarantor for others. Even so, to avoid becoming a private citizen and open to prosecution for his debts, Caesar left for his province before his praetorship had ended. In Hispania he conquered the Collechi and Lusitani, and was hailed as imperator by his troops, reformed both the law regarding debts, and completed his governorship in high esteem. Being hailed as imperator entitled him to receive a triumph upon his return to Rome. However, he also wanted to stand for consul, the most senior magistracy in the Republic. If he were to celebrate a triumph, he would have to remain a soldier and stay outside the city until the ceremony. But to stand for election, he would need to lay down his command and enter Rome as a private citizen. He could not do both in the time available. He asked the Senate for permission to stand in absentia, but Cato blocked the proposal. Faced with the choice between a triumph and a consulship, Caesar chose the consulship.